Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another Free Market Foundation podcast. This edition with me, Chris Hattingh, project manager and researcher here at the FMF. Thank you all once again for joining me. I hope you're all enjoying the new vlog format. Hopefully I'm speaking into the mic clearly enough, getting right up in there. Please turn down the sound if it's too loud, but just so you know, we're trying out these new methods of recording, and I hope you're enjoying it. Last week's episode of my podcast, we had about 500 views, 440, 450, I think, so let's round up to 500. But anyway, very good numbers, and thank you all very much for watching, for liking, for sharing and commenting and subscribing to the channel. And I'd like to remind you all to please keep doing that with this episode and our future episodes. You can also find all our written work at www.freemarketfoundation.com. So this week I wanted to make things a bit more philosophical. My background is philosophy, so I wanted to talk about ideas more abstractly and the effects of ideas on our lives. It was recently said by certain politicians in the country that we're going to turn around the economy no matter what, that people need to get on board, and also that NHI is going to be implemented no matter what. Now, hopefully all of you have seen the work we've been doing and posting about the NHI, why we think it's a very bad idea, the damage that it's going to cause both to the private healthcare sector of the country as well as the country's economy and the fiscus. I hope you've all had a chance to go over at least some of what we've been doing. We've been trying to put out a lot of commentary on this issue in the last few days. We think it's very important to fight this intrusion into people's lives through the NHI bill every step along the way as much as we can, and we're trying to keep up that fight as best as possible. But anyway, this comment by this politician to me is deeply concerning, because it indicates that no matter what the people of South Africa say, at least some people in the country, it doesn't have to be the majority, it could be a minority, it could be one person. It appears that no matter what one person takes issue with in the country, politicians are hell-bent on pursuing their plans. No matter what criticism we level against it, no matter the issues we might raise, be they moral, economic, legal, and take your pick, all of these things are important, and it's part of a healthy democracy that the citizens are heard by the politicians and that their concerns are taken seriously. And such comments to me are deeply, deeply concerning. They indicate that no matter what the people say, the politicians are going to pursue their ideological goals no matter what. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with ideology. I think it depends on the content of your ideology. We all have different world views. We all have certain views on morality, ethics, what is legal, what is moral, that sort of thing. But for a politician to come out and say that, for example, we're going ahead with NHI no matter what, whether people like it or not, I think that indicates an attitude of, I don't want to call it entitlement. I think it's a bit worse than that. It's a bit more difficult to fight against. It's a sense of, we know what is best for you and you don't. Maybe you can call it the ideology or the philosophy of the philosopher kings, that there are some people, politicians, normally bureaucrats, who, if only we give them enough power, they can guide our lives as they think is best for us. No matter what issues we have with it, no matter how concerned we are about the implementation or the plan itself, they're going to pursue this, and we either have to get on board, I guess, or get out. And to me, that is not in the spirit of what a good, robust democracy is. Democracy is about debate, back and forth, input on laws and policies and this kind of thing. And now, using the NHI as the most recent and I guess biggest example, it shows that there are some in parliament and politicians, generally speaking, who want to pursue their plans no matter what the damage it might cause to us, and no matter the concerns that we raise. Maybe they're going to be right about the effects of it, maybe we're going to be right. Regardless, they're not engaging in good faith with the public. They're pursuing this as something that they have decided is vital for South Africa, vital for them, vital for us. And they're going to dictate to us what they think we should be doing with our money, which doctors we should go to whom we should pay money, that we should give government this sort of control over our lives and our families' lives. And I think that is highly, highly concerning. and highly problematic. We're paying lip service to democracy in the country at the moment. We seem to only listen to those with whom we agree on issues, and the rest are either ostracized as the other or unnecessary or unwanted, no matter their standing. And if you're a citizen of a country, in a country that should be a good democracy, such as South Africa, for which people fought and died, it really, to me, it tramples on those sacrifices to say that we're going to implement a policy no matter what the people think. I think that is a serious problem, and we need to raise this issue and point out to politicians that they are accountable to us. They must always keep this in mind. We are not accountable to them. They must always listen to what the people say. They must follow proper procedure. They must follow the principles of the rule of law, of not arbitrarily deciding on policies and laws which impact very closely and deeply on our lives. And they must, at the very least, maybe it's a bad idea or a worse idea, but at the very least sound or look like they care. At the moment, it doesn't sound or look like anyone cares. They're sort of in their little echo chamber, and they're pursuing policies which everyone is indicating to them is going to be disastrous. Again, taking the NHI as the most important example. Now, just to make this discussion a bit broader, and what I mentioned in the introduction about ideas and the importance of ideas and philosophy. So my favorite novelist, I don't think just be careful when we talk about anything objectivism related, because I don't want to speak on behalf of Ayn Rand, but I consider her, my favorite novelist and philosopher. I think she considered herself more of a novelist, a writer, than a philosopher. She developed her own system of philosophy called objectivism, and that's sort of something that I've tried to study deeply and use in all my writings and my research and that kind of thing, and it's a system which I try and implement as much as possible. Now, Rand, she wrote a lot about philosophy and the importance of ideas, and how the prevalent ideas in a society can show you the path on which that society is going, sort of the direction in which it's going, the results which are going to come about because of that philosophy and those ideas. We all have personal philosophies, we all have personal ideas, and these sort of dictate our actions. Now, just as we have this on a personal level, so too societies have this. And I'll just give you all a quote by Rand. It is from For the New Intellectual. It's a collection of her essays, and I'll just read through it here. Rand, and I quote, she says, "Just as a man's actions are preceded and determined by some form of idea in his mind, so a society's existential conditions are preceded and determined by the ascendancy of a certain philosophy among those whose job it is to deal with ideas. The events of any given period of history are the result of the thinking of the preceding period." Now, when she talks about those whose job it is to deal with ideas, she's talking about the academics, the politicians, the leaders of a society, quote, leaders, maybe think tanks, that sort of thing. What these people write and say indicates the sort of general direction of a society, what its people think. And they also pull the populace in general along certain lines. So if the prevalent philosophy that politicians and academics talk about is socialism, generally the country is going to head in that direction. Of course, the people can push back, as people are trying to do now with the NHI bill, but it is clear that many in government are committed to this ideological path of state control, the state dictating to us what we can do with our lives, where we can go for our health care, which doctors we can go to, how much doctors and nurses can be paid, all this sort of stuff. So the idea, I think the broad premise of South Africa at the moment, at least of the South African government, is one of statism, progressively heading towards socialism and communism. It is that the state is at the center of our lives, that the state has supreme control over us, and that it ought to implement these policies such as the NHI, increased taxation, expropriation without compensation, all these sorts of things which increase its control over us, but which it couches in the language of being to our benefit. These things are always, the state isn't going to come out, no politician is going to come out directly and say they think they should control us and tell us what to do. They're going to dress it up in moral language about how it's for our own good, how it's for the needy, how it's for social solidarity, social justice, social cohesion. but none of these terms, when carried to term, to use a pregnant metaphor, none of them, when carried to term, result in anything resembling the words that they use to dress them up in the first place. They're all going to result in serious infractions on civil liberties, real justice, the rule of law, constitutionalism, and basic economic theory, as well as morality. All of these plans are based on the idea that the state or the group is superior to the individual. Now, for me, morality has to be grounded in the individual. Your own life is yours to live as you see fit, as you decide. Your own goals, your own decisions, all of that is up to you to decide, what you should do, what you should pursue, with whom you should interact, where you should trade, where you should invest your money, where you should live. To put it broadly, South Africa, just as a side note, we're restricting people's lives more and more and more, and I think that's why more South Africans are leaving the country than ever before. They're going to places which are more free. And South Africa, obviously under apartheid, used to be very restricted. Then we came to 1994, the advent of democracy, and we are relatively free. But there are incremental steps along the path to tyranny, and it seems like we're following that route, unfortunately. Just to give you a few more examples of sort of things where you can see state control entrenching more and more and more, you can talk about the above inflation salary increases for the civil service. Civil servants are paid astronomically high salaries in South Africa compared to the work that they actually do, and I think a lot of them feel that this is right, that they're doing a lot of work for us, whether we like it or not. That's the other thing, but they're going to do it for us, and we just need to I guess go along for the ride. Then the other thing with the state-owned enterprises, Eskom and South African Airways obviously receive bailout after bailout, and I don't think government is ever going to admit that it is at fault here, that it can't run these businesses. You can't consider them businesses in any true sense of that word, and I think business is a very moral endeavor and a good thing to be engaged in. But to consider something a government business, to me, is almost a contradiction in terms, because they keep receiving bailout after bailout, and they're not subject to the normal rules of the market as other businesses are. Other businesses, when they fail, as Eskom and SAA have failed time after time after time, they'll go under. Their board will hold the CEO or the management or whomever accountable, and eventually that company will fold. But with the government SOEs, they get bailout after bailout funded by the taxpayer, and this means that they can simply continue with their very bad decisions. So that's one more example of the state simply being supreme over the individual. Then, of course, we have the NHI. We have free education that came in December 2017, free tertiary education. Now, many people will consider that a moral endeavor. Why shouldn't all young South Africans receive free higher education? Well, that comes with certain terms and conditions and certain ideological, certain ideological requirements. The government, if it's going to provide you with education, it's going to impose its own ideological views on that form of education that you receive, and it's going to be restricted in many ways, because the government tends to be quite insular, not open to new ideas, not open to discussion and debate. And the people who come out of the tertiary educations after receiving 4 or 5 years of tertiary education are not going to have the same skills and abilities as people in other countries which have freer universities. And that's the unfortunate consequence of free higher education. Of course, remember that nothing is ever free. It's all paid for by the taxpayer. And for a government that likes to talk about focusing on the poor and the plight of the poor, it's interesting that we're now pursuing something such as the NHI, which is fiscally unreasonable and unattainable, while government could be spending its limited resources on stuff like welfare, social grants, that sort of thing. They should be improving their services, not looking to take on even more and more and more. But again, it goes back to the philosophy. The philosophy is the state is supreme, and it will dictate to us and guide our lives as it decides is best for us, whether we like it or not. Just one more thing on the sort of comments around, NHI and whether people like it or not, we should just get on board, we're going to have it regardless. I think that indicates to me that no matter what the markets say, how much investment leaves the country, politicians are hell-bent on these positions that they've staked out for themselves. and maybe they think they need to pursue these policies because they're going to win them votes, or maybe they truly believe in these policies from a philosophical and moral point of view, but they need to realize that as soon as you use force to compel people to act in certain ways, you're acting in an immoral manner. Now the NHI is said, we're going to implement it because we need to care for each other. It's about bringing the private sector and the public sector together. It's about the equal distribution of healthcare. No one has said that yet, but it's not invitation. Apologies. It's not an invitation. It's just a way of sneaking in. Let's call it that, of sneaking in this concept of redistribution, taking from some to give out to others. Because going back to you can go to the idea of wealth, for example. Let's go to that. There's a view, a faulty, unfortunate view, that wealth is created by one person stealing it from another person. There's no notion, no concept that wealth is individually created, that each person has his or her own wealth pie, that the country doesn't own all the people's wealth, the government doesn't own our wealth. There's no countrywide or global wealth pie. Wealth is ever changing for each individual. We each make different decisions with our wealth, often bad decisions, unfortunately, but we do. And this NHI for me showcases an attitude of we will take from some to give to others, and in the process we're going to destroy both the private sector healthcare and also the few parts of the public sector healthcare which are working. We all know the unfortunate stories of public healthcare, the tragedies, the bad stories, and now government is, I think, going to bring all healthcare down to that sort of level. And we're going to see the effects of that. More and more people are going to leave the country, and at the end of the day, all healthcare is going to be at a very low level. Yes, it's going to be free. That's fine, and you're all going to be able to go get healthcare wherever you like. Not where you like, where government decrees you may go. So you'll be able to go for whatever services government think is best, and there will be rationing, as there always is with limited resources. The government will have to decide who deserves healthcare over others, and unfortunately, whatever group is in power of government is going to decide for itself and for its friends, its beneficiaries, its contacts, its voters, that they deserve healthcare more than other people. And we're going to continue seeing these same problems over and over again, just on a much larger scale. And it's obviously sad to, it's not, I don't take pleasure in coming to these conclusions, but to me, again, just logically, it follows from the premises to the conclusion. If these are your ideas, that the group is superior to the individual, then you're going to see the effects of that philosophy. So we shouldn't be surprised that these policies are being implemented now. I think in South Africa we need a fundamental shift in our philosophy, in our worldview, in how we view the role of the state and of the individual. I think we have too, we cozy up too much to authority, whether it's in the form of religious leaders, maybe of families, that sort of thing. We're scared of offending people and stepping on toes, and we don't want to take issue with what our leaders tell us. And that to me is very dangerous. There always needs to be, again, going back to a healthy democracy idea, there needs to be questioning, there needs to be an interrogation of ideas, of where they come from, of why they're being implemented. And at this point, we're not doing it because we're following the state no matter where it leads us. I've heard a few commentators take issue with the NHI, but not with the very idea that the state should be in charge of healthcare. Some people think it'll work better if different political parties are in charge. Well, I think that's the wrong way to look at it and the wrong way to argue against it. You should be against the very notion, the very concept, the very premise that the state should be in charge of anyone's healthcare, no matter which politician or which party is in charge. It's the same thing with expropriation without compensation. I don't think you should take issue with the skin color of a politician, his own religion, his or her gender, any of that stuff. That is irrelevant to who's in charge. The problem is with expropriation without compensation, we're going to give the state arbitrary power to take anyone's property. And no matter who's in charge of the government at any point in the future, they'll be able to take our property if they decide that the purpose is justified. So I wanted to use this episode to indicate the importance of ideas. Always interrogate what is behind these policies, the laws, the regulations, what politicians say. Don't take what they say at face value. Always investigate what is behind these statements. Everyone, again, has a personal philosophy that guides their actions. And if you can lay out those premises and ideas more clearly, I think you can argue against and interrogate these policies better, because you can question the very foundation of the policies instead of just debating the pragmatism of it, whether it's going to work or not, whether it's practical or not, whether there's the money for it or not. You should be focused on the morality of a policy as well. Question whether this is the proper role of government, whether the government should have this much control over us, whether the government should be allowed to decide for me where I go for my healthcare, for example. Bring these sort of concrete. So, for example, where you go for healthcare, take that up to the more abstract level and figure out what this says about a politician or a person's view of the world, the role of the state, and the role of the individual in the country and the society. And I think using that path might enable you to better tackle these issues. I always try and do it every day, and of course you don't do it perfectly all the time, but I think it's a worthwhile exercise. So just something for you all to keep in mind. I think I'll end it there. We're on about 20 minutes, so thank you for watching through this episode with me. I hope you've learned something on the importance of ideas. Just to reiterate, the writer and philosopher speaking about Ayn Rand, here's one of her books. I'll hold it up there. That's one of hers, Ayn Rand, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. The one I was reading from was For the New Intellectual. But if you haven't read any of Ayn Rand's works before, I would highly recommend getting into it. It will help you, again, identify the premises behind what people and politicians say, and why the majority of what they say is based on the state being supreme over the individual, and why they all want to use, in some way or another, they want to use force to control your lives for their own purposes, and why you need to fight this around every corner and every step along the way. Okay, I'll end it there. Thank you once again for joining me. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Today is Thursday, the 15th of August. I think tomorrow we'll have a Free Marketeers episode again. So myself, Martin, and Mpiaki will be talking to you all tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.